Auspicious timing. Welcome back, my modern admirers of media, the Green Scorpion here, with another collisionist countdown, this one voted on in a poll by my ever-passionate patrons. And as longtime Scorpion fans will have noticed, it's another type of Mancer. Back in the days of antiquity, aka 2015, I tackled my 4th weapons month with a set of countdowns based on masters of different elements: water, earth, fire, air, and for good measure, lightning and ice. That's the classical 4 and 2 of the most popular substitutes in a game's element system. But I always thought it'd be fun to go back and hit more of those unofficial elements. And today's topic is a great opportunity to dip my toes into Chronomancy, the manipulation of time. This essential component of reality is usually too big for a type chart, but there's no shortage of heroes and villains whose skill set is themed around time. I can even think of a few games where time is an attribute for attacks on par with fire or water, such as Baten Kaitos. Needless to say, control over the very sequence of all events makes for an extremely powerful character, nigh untouchable in some cases, and often confusing as their shenanigans cause ripples in causality and branching universes. We could be here all day untangling the histories and unhistories of these 4th dimensional demonstrators, but to make things easier, we're going to adhere to the same rules as we did back in Elements Month. That means we're considering these characters in a combat setting. Plenty of video game characters are time travelers: Link, Chrono, Crash Bandicoot. And if you think about it, we're all traveling through time right now, just in the same direction at a rate of 1 second per second. But we want characters who can dynamically manipulate time, either through magic, technology, or some unknown third thing, to get a leg up in a combat situation. This can mean slowing down or speeding up certain objects, rapidly aging your enemies, or using a time freeze to effectively teleport. You would be right to argue that time as a concept is just an extension of space, moving along not just the X, Y, and Z axis, but also the T axis. So it's pretty common for time controllers to also hold dominion over space. But I'm gonna try and keep the focus on the time stuff. So abilities like opening portals or shifting the orientation of gravity can have their own list someday. What would I call those? Chronomancers? Astromancers?
I think I'll call him Bob.
Well, anyway, there's also the excuse that a really good Chronomancer wouldn't need to be in a fight in the first place. They could just freeze the room and slit their enemy's throat, or go back in time and stop the fight from ever occurring in the first place.
First of all, that's horrible.
That's not really what we want today either. We're looking for fighters who can use temporal powers in creative ways to dispatch their enemies. There can be bonus points for less violent uses of the power, but if the Time Lord is truly untouchable, then they won't be really all that much fun to talk about. Does that make sense to everyone? Well, don't worry, if there's an issue later, we can always go back. So set your watches and fill up those flux capacitors. Today we present the top 10 video game Chronomancers. It feels like every countdown I work on nowadays, I have to make a nail-biting last-minute decision between the number 10 Gatekeeper and Sir not appearing on this list. This time, it came down to 2 fighting game characters. On the big hand, we have Sassalamel, the scythe-wielding Sumerian from Soul Calibur. And on the little hand, there's Axel Lowe, a hapless former gang leader with a pair of chain sickles from Guilty Gear. 2 very similar weapons, oddly enough, and both incorporating more time abilities in their most recent games. Now, truth be told, Axel might be the more powerful Chronomancer in lore. Now that he's gained control over his weird time-slipping condition, he can harness it to show up wherever he's needed most, or save an entire building of people like he's Quicksilver in that time in a bottle sequence. But gameplay-wise, he's mostly a zoner with some nifty fire magic. In Strive, he's got a time stop super that admittedly is really useful for starting your match-winning combo, but that's his only instance of time magic extended to the player. So ultimately, I went with Sassalamel, whose Chronomancy plays a much larger role in his moveset, if only in his most recent appearance. And now that I'm reading up on him, I realize that a lot of my prior understanding of this character was misinformed. I saw this cool hooded scythe guy, and I played up to his ending in Soul Calibur 4, where he's in the modern day, dripped out like Morpheus and vowing to usher humanity into a better tomorrow. And I assumed he was some kind of benevolent sentinel, like Clockwork from Danny Phantom. But no, in his first appearance in Soul Calibur 3, this guy's actually a major villain. Sassalamel was a member of an ancient assembly tasked with protecting the sacred blade, Soul Calibur. He studied magic in combat, but always criticized his order for simply protecting the light sword, rather than using it to fix the world's problems. This eventually got him kicked out, and with a major chip on his shoulder, he delved into forbidden magics to make himself immortal. Now, every time he dies, he's reborn into a new body that eventually grows up into the same grumpy guy, retaining all of his memories and experiences. And, unsurprisingly, this turned out to be a prison of his own making. In Soul Calibur 3, Sassalamel manipulated the entire cast to fully power up Soul Calibur and its dark opposite Soul Edge with the hopes that they could kill him and he could finally get some rest. And no, this actually turned him into an evil entity called Abyss that became the game's final boss. If I had a nickel, am I right? All of this is to say that Sassalamel already had too much time on his hands, so eventually, he got his hands on time. In Soul Calibur 3 and 4, his moveset is mostly physical, with some Soul Charge swings here and there, and a critical art where he throws his opponent into a Void Portal. He took Soul Calibur 5 off, which I always thought was weird. He's the one character you know would still be around after the time jump. But he makes his grand return in Soul Calibur 6, and incidentally, 6 takes place in a new timeline to reset some problematic continuity, and Sassalamel is one of 2 characters who actually recognizes that the universe got retconned. The other being Cassandra, who fell through a portal from the old continuity and is actually the same person. You know, general multiverse stuff. Soul Calibur 6 is much more robust in its systems compared to previous entries, with many characters sporting unique mechanics that make them feel different. For Sassalamel, it's time curses. Many of Sassy's moves have the added effect of either placing a time curse on his opponent, which can be stacked up to 3 times, or detonating the placed curses to momentarily freeze enemies in place. That might seem like a long walk just to say that this guy can stop his opponent sometimes, but in a fighting game where hit stuns are measured in frames, an advantage like this is huge. And if a player's good, they can get these little temporal head starts fairly often to turn the tide of a match. Sassalamel's certainly not a beginner-friendly character. Where most players are memorizing 5 or 6 combo strings and a handful of mix-ups, a functional SAS player needs to know 4 times as many, depending on how many curses his opponent already has and what you're trying to accomplish. And hey, sometimes it's easier just to bash him off the edge of the stage. Sassalamel's great at that too. And of course, the crowning jewel of his time-stopping arsenal, his critical edge.
To reap! My abyss shall take you! Just as it is written.
So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about picking Saz over Axel. They both have a freeze frame super, but everything else Saz does is putting him ahead in this category. With his whole Reaper motif and Thanatophilia, this new emphasis on time magic just feels right for the guy. And although he's found new purpose in preserving the proper flow of history, he still retains his duplicitous character. The dude's not a team player, and he'll sooner force warriors to fulfill their parts in Destiny rather than ask them nicely. I guess when you have a giant scythe, everyone else looks like wheat.
Start again anew once you're reborn.
I mentioned in the intro that Link is a time traveler. Bit of an understatement, really. Time is a major motif in the Legend of Zelda series. Ocarina of Time, Oracle of Ages, A Link to the Past. That one doesn't actually have any time travel in it, but Skyward Sword, Majora's Mask, Oracle of Seasons, Phantom Hourglass, all of these titles involve the manipulation of time in some way. And while Link will often use these magical MacGuffins to get where and when he's needed, he's actually not the time fighter I had in mind. I present for your consideration Hyrule's true Chronomancer, Princess Zelda herself. Now, Zelda's a character that's been around for a long time, and she's taken a lot of forms with a variety of weapons and powers, so I don't want to rank her too high. If I had to associate her with any element, I'd sooner pick Light. Photomancy, Lumomancy, take your pick.
I think I'll call him Bob.
But I started to consider her for this list while playing Age of Imprisonment. True fans will know that Zelda is actually a variety of characters, reincarnations of this holder of the Triforce of Wisdom born in different eras, and, as Skyward Sword reveals, mortal embodiments of the goddess Hylia. Now, for the sake of fairness, I'm going to limit this entry to the specific princess we meet in Breath of the Wild. That still gives us 4 games to work with, but tugging on this thread recontextualizes a lot of previous Zelda lore. So let's start with Breath of the Wild. You know Link's trusty Sheikah slate with all of its helpful runes, including the stasis ability? Well, don't forget that this overclocked iPad was originally Zelda's device. It's even her first weapon in Age of Calamity. Now, stasis always tickled my brain with its fun quantum physics. You freeze an object and then you hit it a bunch of times and it's launched through the air. But think about how this works from the object's perspective. That target just experienced all the abuse of the last 10 seconds in a single instance. I'd want to fly away too. Maybe take out my frustration on a poor unsuspecting Yiga. That being said, all the characters in Calamity can get these attacks with these runes, so let's get back to the princess. Zelda's interests lie in research and archaeology. Hooray for women in STEM! But her dad King Roam knows enough about the series he's in to predict that she'll have some game-changing power if she can unlock it. And what she unlocks is the power to lock things, sealing away evil until a time it can be more properly dealt with. And though this power still looks light-based and comes a bit later than Roland would have liked, Zelda uses it to seal the existential disaster that is Calamity Ganon in Hyrule Castle for 100 years. And while they don't explicitly describe this as locking them in time, we'll see afterward that Zelda hasn't aged a day. She might be getting tired, but there isn't much urgency in her psychic messages. She can hold the seal long enough for Link to cleanse the 4 divine beasts, retrieve the Master Sword, chase more Koroks, whatever he has to do, really. That's pretty impressive, putting a century-long pause on you and your nemesis, but the best is yet to come. In Tears of the Kingdom, a run-in with a dehydrated Matt Mercerdorf causes Zelda to inadvertently time-slip back to Hyrule's antiquity. Meeting with the first king and queen of the land, Zelda learns that not only does she command light, but has latent time powers which improve as she trains with her ancestor Sonia. So yeah, Zelda's been a Chronomancer all along. She fights in the imprisoning war as a Sage of Time, and this is where those deeper implications of the series begin to come in. Now, I know it's tenuous if Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom even exist in the same continuity as the older games. I have my theories, but certain concepts clearly echo in both universes, and one of those is the role of the sages. In A Link to the Past, Zelda is the leader of 6 maidens who are all descendants of sages. A similar thing happens in Four Swords Adventure. Link Between Worlds has an all-new set of sages, and most famous is Ocarina of Time, where each sage is associated with a specific attribute: fire, water, forest, etc. All of these sextets of sages are led by a Princess Zelda as the 7th. So I posit to you, what if Zelda was always the Sage of Time? And it checks out. We have the same goddess soul appearing in different eras. Zelda's the one who has the Ocarina of Time before she passes it to Link during her escape from Castletown. Maybe the little Dickens nicked it, but at the end of the game, she certainly knows how to use it to send Link back to his childhood. And in Majora's Mask, a younger Zelda, without those same memories, is the one to remind Link how to play the Song of Time. Maybe all those times that she sealed Ganon away were variations of time spells. Then, fast forward to Tears of the Kingdom and rewind again to Age of Imprisonment, and we finally see Zelda busting out these time powers against monsters, freezing time or reversing it on her sword to boomerang it back to her. It's still a lot of light magic. Honestly, she'd make a better Sage of Light than Rauru. Or at least human Rauru. What do you even do? Possess owls? Ultimately, I'm including the older Zeldas in this video not to count towards Wild Zelda's feats, but rather inform what her powers are and why she might have them. Throughout her lifetime, Zelda's been a spellcaster, an archer, a pirate, a ninja, an abomination from God, and a spawner of endless mattresses. That's a bit too multi-talented for me to rank her any higher as a time specialist. But this open-world iteration of the princess is a much more focused Minute Maiden and deserves to be in the conversation. And if you think about it, this girl's at least 10.1 thousand years old. Dang, Chronomancy is one hell of a moisturizer. Though she was looking a little scaly at one point. It's fun trying to wrap your mind around the quantum phenomena possibly at work with these powers, but sometimes it's more about the art form. On a conceptual level, most media, at least anything with a story, manipulates time and space to get its message across. A painting locks us in a moment. A paragraph break transports us to a new location. When we watch a movie, we understand that we're skipping the mundane parts of these characters' lives to see the events that pertain to the narrative. To enjoy film is to be whisked through time. And...
Henshin a go-go, baby!
I wonder how many of you thought of this one. Beautiful Joe is as straightforward as Chronomancers come, but rather than bending the laws of the universe, his powers are contextualized as simple film editing. Joe is an avid fan of cheesy action flicks, particularly The Adventures of Captain Blue. But one day, he finds his favorite film isn't following the usual plot, and suddenly the villain reaches through the screen and abducts Joe's girlfriend Sylvia into the movie world. Joe pursues, meeting with a past his prime hero and taking up the V-Watch, which gives him a Sentai-style supersuit and a myriad of VFX powers. These powers come in 3 main modes. Slow-mo brings everything to a crawl, Speed Up lets Joe move super fast, and Zoom In changes some of Joe's attacks into more devastating maneuvers. If you didn't know any better, Slow-mo and Speed Up might sound functionally similar, allowing Joe to react and move faster than his enemies respectively. That's sort of true, but the key difference is how time is experienced by the hypothetical audience, creating unexpected side effects for each power. You know how in a movie, time will slow down when a punch hits someone in the jaw to make it feel really impactful? Well, for Joe, hitting someone in slow-mo literally makes the punch more powerful. Perception is reality. Slow-mo will also make explosions bigger, allow Joe to matrix dodge around bullets, and kick homing missiles back to sender. And one of my favorite weird applications, helicopter propellers slow down with the rest of the world, but gravity doesn't get the memo and causes aircrafts to lose altitude when you slow down time. Really, Joe's a menace to any vehicles. Now, speed up is naturally great in the opposite direction. Your punches are a little less powerful, but you can get in way more of them. You can drop down faster if it's too dangerous to be in the air, and you can even catch fire for some burning effects. Zoom in admittedly isn't time manipulation, but it does sort of highlight a moment, allowing Joe to windmill kick or something equally intricate. Zoom in also combos with the other two powers in interesting ways, as do the boomerangs and bombs that Joe can throw. Remember, explosions are bigger in slow motion, and there's a giant robot that also benefits from VFX powers. Now clearly this is a unique take on Chronomancy, working off movie logic, but Joe's powers aren't actually restricted to the movie world. In Beautiful Joe 2, Joe's enemies follow him back out of the theater. At first the V-Watch isn't working in what the game calls the real world, until Joe finds himself with a group of people that he needs to save. The mere presence of an audience turns Joe's fight into a show, and thus his powers of pacing return. So long as Joe is being observed, he is a Chronomancer. And in Beautiful Joe Double Trouble, we discover that you don't even need a crowd. Sylvia just needs to follow Joe with a video camera and his ego will bring the V-Watch to life. As long as there's a narrative, a form of storytelling or media preservation, Joe can stretch or compress time as he sees fit. Well, you know, until the VFX bar runs out. Smart move to upgrade that early. I'd even say this applies to his Marvel vs. Capcom appearance. Obviously, it would be pretty frustrating in a fighting game match for time to constantly lurch and accelerate, but I think what we're seeing here is an outsider's perspective of what Joe's shenanigans would look like, busting out extra hits in his air combo before gravity can remember to pull him down. And the full effect is on display with his hyper combos complete with that film reel border. Joe's time travel may only go in one direction, but by playing with rate and framing, he's sure to leave his enemies on the cutting room floor.
That means I'm both beautiful and stylish.
I don't reiterate it in the intro in every video anymore, but I do have a rule on this channel. Only games I've played. Because even if I could stop time, I don't think I would ever get to every game people want me to mention. Sorry to any Blinks the Cat fans out there. I can tell he's got Chronotech, but it didn't save him from being locked on the original Xbox. Thus, I haven't played any of his games. On the other hand, technically I've played Touhou. Now, I still avoided talking about the Little Girl Bullet Hell series back in Elements Month because, for the most part, the characters don't really interest me. Whatever element or power they have, it all just becomes a mandala of projectiles. Very pretty, but I don't look at the Fujiwara boss fight and think, wow, what an awesome display of pyromancy. I think, damn, I would never have the patience to beat this. There is an exception, however, and that exception is Sakuya Izayo, the Time Lord of Touhou. Sakuya is the chief maid of the Scarlet Manor and a loyal servant to the vampire Romelia Scarlet despite herself being an ordinary human. Or is she? The series never really explains how Sakuya came to work at the mansion, or why she can spin time like a yo-yo. What we do get instead are a lot of fun anecdotes across her video game and manga appearances. While there is a whole team of maids in the manor, Sakuya ends up doing all of the cleaning herself. She's hardworking sometimes, but other times she's extremely lazy and often leaves tasks to the last minute. But because of her powers, that last minute can be stretched ad infinitum until the job is done. And besides, dust doesn't really blow around when time is stopped. In many games such as Embodiment of the Scarlet Devil, Sakuya will attempt to impede you from getting to Romelia, wanting to prove that she can handle you herself. And her way of handling you is knives. Lots and lots of knives. This is where the time powers make her the most interesting bullet generator in Touhou to me. For some reason, if a character channels spirit energy or summons lightning, we can just accept that they can make as many projectiles as they want. But for some reason, the fact that Sakuya is throwing physically tangible silverware demands that we explain where all of these blades are coming from. and source material has a few possible answers for us. It's speculated that because she can warp time, she also warps space. She actually has control of the size of the inside of the mansion, so she added storage closets that she keeps stocked with knives to teleport into her hands at any time. That just makes me think of Tenten from Naruto. She has a similar explanation for her weapon flurries. But the more interesting description I've seen is that Sakuya can actually pull the same knife from different moments in time to make them all appear simultaneously. That's a knife for every second in the length of eternity, and they can all be here immediately. After she's thrown a knife, Sakuya can always stop time to pick it back up at her leisure. She's gotta clean up after all. So any way you slice it, Sakuya uses Chronomancy to facilitate a torrential downpour of stabby death. And that's not all. Sakuya chivalrously chooses to not freeze her opponent most of the time, but anything in the environment is free game, including herself. In this way, Sakuya can appear to teleport by stopping time and casually walking somewhere else, chaos control style. And she can manipulate time on her knives mid-flight to slow them down, speed them up, stop or start them, or manipulate their trajectory, all to trip up the overwhelmed player. And that's just in her unplayable appearances. Starting in Perfect Cherry Blossom, you're able to select Sakuya to attempt the Gauntlet of Gatling Gals, and she's probably my favorite girl to play as thanks to her particularly good spell cards. These can clear all projectiles on the field, which is standard for any character's spells, but I like to think that Sakuya is just nullifying their timeline completely. She can also freeze everything to give you a second to plan your route, and increase her own movement speed to execute those twitchy maneuvers. And of course, Sakuya wouldn't miss out on a fighting game. Naturally, she's a zoner, either spraying and praying with her knives, or time-freezing knife waves to activate later like traps. She's also got a handy no-time force field that stops any attack, and a time-stop super just like Axel Low. And I have to acknowledge this. Yes, Sakuya Izayo is clearly inspired by Dio Brando from JoJo. She never drops a steamroller on anyone, but I'm sure she could if she wanted to. Honestly, Miss Izayo has a case for one of the most powerful characters on this list. I kept her a little low still because, in the end, her powers amount to the same projectile kaleidoscopes that all of her fellow Toho girls are capable of. But knowing how these attacks work through quantum cutlery makes her one of the most dynamic Toho bosses in my book. She probably could be even more effective if she wasn't married to throwing daggers. Imagine this girl with a submachine gun. Or a steamroller. But I appreciate her keeping a brand. With a complicated topic like this, it's only natural for Kingdom Hearts to make an appearance. So, Master Xehanort, the villain who's been 10 moves ahead of you since before you were even born. Of course he's dabbled in time travel. This guy was trained as a Keyblade Master by a guy named Odin, made enemies by harnessing the power of body snatched a teenager so he could become a scientist's apprentice, got split into two separate supervillains, one of which was kidnapping princesses while the other created Organization 13, both got destroyed so he could return as the Old Man and form the real Organization 13, made up of different versions of himself throughout the timeline, including Heartless Xehanort, Nobody Xehanort, and Bodyjack Teenage Xehanort, plus some other lackeys that he just put a little Nort in, including Luxord, who's supposed to be the time guy, but comes across more as the gambling addict guy. But this organization wouldn't even be possible without the Nort that put it all together, young Xehanort. At some point around Kingdom Hearts 1, Xehanort's Heartless went back in time to bestow time manipulation powers on his younger self, so he could go on this fourth-dimensional recruitment mission.
That is without a doubt the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
And since each Nort is treated as their own entity, I'm gonna keep this conversation focused on the one most associated with time traveling. And with all that said, this fucking guy. If you weren't already overwhelmed by this plot by Dream Drop Distance, young Xehanort is here to blast you with vague threats from every direction. Masters of Darkness in this series already get free teleporting powers, but Nort is able to jump through the realm of the subconscious, carrying along his older cohorts to ruin your day. This was all with the goal of turning Sora into the final organization member, which granted doesn't work, but fuck this guy for trying so hard. Now, the rules of time travel in Kingdom Hearts are shockingly pretty rigid. You can only travel to times and places where you've been, but Xehanort had so many forms and is old as dirt, so that gives him a lot of options. The catch is that he also has to leave his body in his original time, so when we see him in Dream Drop Distance, he's really more of a corporeal phantom swiftly running out of battery. Though that doesn't stop him from being one of the most annoying boss fights in the series. Funny thing, when your time powers are strong enough, fights with you automatically get pulled into a giant clock dimension. Here he'll assault you with his dual blades, which seem to lightsaber out of a pair of clock hands, and can combine into a spear or a time whip. And speaking of which, it never feels good to get hit by that thing. Riku gets suspended in midair like he's giving an opening monologue.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation.
And you just kinda have to wait for him to set up his wombo combo. He can also turn back time to recover health, and when you get him down to critical, he performs an infamous desperation move. He pushes you back to the perimeter of the arena, merges with the center of the clock, and if you don't get to him fast enough, he'll essentially restart the entire fight. And it's not easy either, as his little time chrysalis is protected by his own time displaced copies of himself to slow you down. Remember, he can time travel to anywhere he's been, and he's been here, so he can be here more. He also has an immunity to all status ailments, including other people's time magic. Mickey throws out Stopza, which works perfectly well on Xemnas and Ansem, but Nort shakes it off like it's nothing. Even when you defeat him, he returns to his own time, hardly bothered by the proceedings. The kid's back in Kingdom Hearts 3, this time inhabiting a fancy replica body so that he can stay in the present for as long as he wants, and he teleports around while monologuing at Sora in Toy Box, tries to possess Buzz Lightyear, and would have gotten away with it too were it not for the shots fired by Sheriff Woody.
My guess is no one's ever loved you before. Because you know nothing about hearts and love. You can't keep us from Andy. We're going home no matter what.
You guys see that? It's called being awesome.
Also, I know the Toy Story arc is basically Xehanort just experimenting with artificial hearts, so he can figure out how to make Xion his 13th organization member, but could you imagine if he went with Plan C and Buzz Lightyear was the last cloaked figure? Also, young Xehanort split the Toy Story world into two so that Woody and the characters that we see are in one world, while everyone else is in the other. So that's just a thing he can do? What, did he just save as the timeline and change the file name? How does that work? And yes, he does get an even harder boss in the DLC. And yes, he has the same desperation attack. And yes, it sucks even worse getting hit by the time whip. But what's even crazier is a fight in the main story where Sora, Riku, and Mickey have to fight Master Xehanort, Ansem Seeker of Darkness, Xemnas, and young Xehanort all at once! A Xehaquart! And at this point, I'm just so sick of saying the word Xehanort. Please stay dead this time, you yellow-eyed freak! When I started researching this project, I could have guessed that I'd include the prince from Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time. I mean, he has the Sands of Time. But I'd be wrong. This is where the combat focus of these Weapons Month adjacent lists hurts certain contenders. Because, yeah, the Sands of Time is mostly used to undo platforming mistakes. Prince of Persia is a bigger series than it looks, and recently, it re-emerged to give us an even better candidate. The main character of the Lost Crown, Sargon. Talk about time loops, didn't we just talk about this guy in Top 15 Metroidvanias? Well, if you don't remember, Sargon is a member of the Immortals, who fans have been calling the Avengers of Ancient Persia. He's already a super durable, super fast swordmaster when the game starts, but on a mission to rescue the kidnapped Prince of Persia, not that Prince of Persia, Sargon finds himself exploring the mythical Mount Kaf, which is currently undergoing a serious temporal upheaval. Time here is going forwards, backwards, sideways, diagonally, or just standing still. The dead are rising, history's repeating, and it has something to do with the Simurgh. Now, this is an actual figure in Iranian mythology, akin to a phoenix, that's said to possess great wisdom and has lived long enough to see the world be born and die 3 times already. Myth doesn't strictly say the Simurgh has anything to do with time, but in this game it certainly does. And much to Sargon's surprise, his own superior officer is trying to harness that bird's divine power. The first time you confront Varum, he's able to Uno reverse the entire boss fight and rewind you off a cliff. So the only solution is to collect some of the Simurgh's feathers to gain time powers of your own. And the game actually calls them time powers, denoting them as the required Metroidvania powers that you'll need to finish the game, as opposed to the many optional charms and enhancements you might also snag through side questing. This is a game that really does tie together the concept of time and space. 2 of your time powers are the Rush of the Simurgh and the Gravity Wings, a fancy way of saying air dash and double jump. but it gets more timey-wimey from there. Clairvoyance allows Sargon to activate hidden platforms. The name Clairvoyance implies it's more of a psychic ability, but it's not like you can interact with these platforms without activating them. I think what's happening here is that you're borrowing from other timelines where those platforms are actually there, kinda like what Elizabeth does in Bioshock Infinite. The Dimensional Claw lets you rip open time and space to catch projectiles, holding them in stasis until you're ready to pull them out again and use as projectiles of your own. You can even capture minor enemies and put them on your payroll this way. The Shadow of the Simurgh is like a more proactive Sands of Time, where Sargon can save his place somewhere and then instant teleport back to that spot at a moment's notice. This comes in handy in certain puzzle rooms, letting you backtrack around traps after you've triggered them, and becomes a vital dodging tool during boss fights, teleportation by time traveling through the same point in time. And though not a specified time power, there are context-sensitive plinths that let Sargon record his actions and play them back, allowing him to be in 2 or 3 places at once to solve puzzles. Finally, there's the Fabric of Time. Like, the actual Fabric of Time, which Sargon can use as a grappling hook. All of these moves are as important to platforming as they are to combat, using your non-linear maneuverability to find openings in your opponent's attacks. Those opponents include other members of the Immortals, a giant snake deity, a giant wolf deity, the corpse of King Darius, and Sargon himself. Yeah, while running around this cosmic gumbo of causality, sometimes Sargon will run into other versions of Sargon, equivalent versions of him from other possible paths, and he's his own worst enemy. These Sargons have different super moves than the ones you've learned though, so besting them in combat lets you learn those moves and become the strongest version of yourself. Don't feel bad either, they do the same to you. All of this layers over a vicious twin sword combat style to make one hell of a combat system, preparing you for your rematch with Varum, who has become creation itself. After a certain point, 2 time gods clashing against each other cancel each other out, and then it's just a matter of willpower. They may both be immortals, but Sargon's immortal... Being able to navigate this crash of time flow is a feat in and of itself. Being able to weave that time flow and lasso someone with it? That's something else entirely. Maybe not as practical as a regular time stop, but it sure as hell is a lot more stylish. For a really long time, whenever I thought about a time guy in video games, this is the guy I would often think of. Aeon from Castlevania Judgment. And that's really weird to me because Castlevania Judgment isn't the greatest game. And depending on your feelings on the Wii and Goofy Party Fighters, you might not even call it a good game. But for whatever reason, it's a game we've talked about a lot in the Countdown community back in the day. And what is nostalgia if not the power to endure way past your natural terminus? Castlevania as a series is a story spanning centuries, based on the soul of one person, Count Dracula, and the generations of people who've stood with and against him. Castlevania Judgment was made as a tribute to this long-running history of characters who mostly never met each other, and Aeon is the guy responsible for all of it. Well, technically there's a demon called Galamoth who's responsible. He's only mentioned in a throwaway line, but he's sending his minion the Time Reaper back from 10,000 years in the future so he can take Dracula's throne for himself. Before this, Galamoth only appeared as a super boss in Symphony of the Night, and weirdly enough, the villain of Kid Dracula, where he was also trying to usurp the Count. So what, we're making Kid Dracula canon now? Well, funny enough, there's some precedent for Galamoth and the time stuff. In Aria of Sorrow, he doesn't appear himself, but collecting his soul makes you immune to being frozen by Time Lords, so it makes sense why the Timekeepers can't stop him or his Special Reaper. But I digress, back to Aeon. As one of the Timekeepers, Aeon's job is to maintain stability in the flow of time. So he's like the TVA, or Clockwork, or what I thought Sassalamel would be like. Or more metatextually, he's Kogi Igarashi maintaining the canon of the series. Aeon, are you the one who erased Circle of the Moon? Well, as the Timekeeper, Aeon can't directly stop the Time Reaper. What he can do is create a time gap, a little pocket realm where he holds a tournament for himself and 13 other Castlevania characters to determine who is mighty enough to defeat the Reaper. This includes Dracula himself, a younger Eric Lacard, Grant Dynasty dressed like a mummy, 2 Belmonts, and this specific golem, but not Soma Cruz because Aeon is self-conscious and knows that Soma wears his style better. I think normally Aeon would be an incorporeal concept unable to interact directly with the lower dimensional beings, but in the time gap he can create a vessel for himself and stand on equal footing with his opponents. Just remember that he doesn't have to fight fairly. He can send Maria back to the 1700s if he chooses to. And Aeon's probably got my favorite story mode. The idea of him going to all this trouble to hold a tournament, win it himself, and decide,
fuck it, I'll do it myself,
is really funny to me. I guess he had to hold the tournament first, something collect 13 souls of the greatest fighters to smite the Time Reaper. I think it's all bullshit, and Aeon just needed to boost his confidence by fighting his favorite video game characters. Then everyone else goes back to their respective time period, presumably with their memories of this erased, or else Trevor's a real dick for not giving his grandson a heads up about all this. Surprisingly enough though, the idea of Aeon in canon does tie some things about the lore together. Like, there's a Saint Germain guy in Curse of Darkness who's also trying to maintain the timeline. Igarashi has since confirmed that he and Aeon are from the same order. Oh, and the stopwatch, an item that's been in Castlevania since the very first game. I always dismissed its time stopping as just a video gamey power-up, but now I'm thinking maybe it's a trinket left by Aeon to help the heroes along. And speaking of watches, Aeon's sword has a similar look to it, with a big hand and little hand that spin around the crossguard. This causes the clock face to glow different colors, changing the effect of Aeon's Hour of Judgment attack from a big laser of cosmic energy to a spinning blade of clock hands to a full-on time stop. Aeon can cycle through these effects by buying enough time, or successfully blocking with his nullifying field, which stops all attacks in their tracks by just negating the happening of them. Then there's his hyper attack, Requiem of the 13th Hour. This attack feels like it takes an hour. Aeon flips his enemy in the air, freezes them in space amongst a cloud of knives and glass shards, slowly walks by with a taunt that's unique for every fighter in the game.
Your quest for eternal beauty is doomed. Nothing withstands time.
And then unleashes a wheel of pointy objects in 12 hourly directions. Clearly Aeon knows his timeline well and uses this knowledge of the story to obliterate his rivals physically and emotionally. I don't think the Time Reaper is the real catalyst here. Aeon sounds like he's wanted to do this his whole life. The dude used time travel to make his own crossover fanfic and insert himself as the strongest character. All for an audience of literally no one else. I almost respect the commitment.
Right on time. This moment was preordained.
So, is it really a Mancer list without League of Legends? Once again, my favorite problematic MOBA provided me with some options. The most by-the-books Chronomancer is Zillion. He's covered in clockworks, he can slow down foes, speed up friends, and he can even reverse death if he's fast enough on his ultimate. With his Father Time aesthetic, he's certainly a powerful timekeeper, if lacking in style. But in 2015, League unveiled a second time-centric champion, Echo, the Boy Who Shattered Time. Just that title alone is awesome, and what an entrance! His initial teaser trailer, Seconds, is like its own beautiful short film. We see Echo duking it out with some chempunk brute, using his patented Zero Drive to reverse his every misstep. But what makes this animation so compelling is the vulnerability on display. Despite the cosmic convenience of his power, it's made clear that Echo can't reverse the damage to his own body, not entirely anyway. Maybe the Zero Drive does mend his broken bones, I mean it's not like we get an X-ray, but from the look on his face, the pain is definitely still there. So not only does he have to learn from each mistake, he has to carry every injury back with him while his enemy gets a fresh start. It adds impact to every pull of that ripcord. In-game, Echo is a rare combination. A character dependent on auto attacks that also scales off of magic. He's able to empower his weapon with... well, at this point in the list, I think it's fair to say that time can be converted into energy, right? From Sargon's Opera Surges to Aeon's Laser, time is a great source of energy, equal to mass times the speed of light squared. I think that's what Einstein meant about relativity.
nobody said the remark.
So Echo can empower his weapon with energized time to deal magic damage, and apply resonance to targets that warps Echo's time field and lets him move faster. His time winders are kind of like clock grenades. They cut through foes, expand into a field of kinetic damage, travel a bit, and then reverse explode and fly back into Echo's hands, potentially slicing through opponents again. His phase dive lets him jump around and blink to an opponent on his next attack, and then there's parallel convergence. Whew, so, an Echo in another reality drops a stasis field that will slow down enemies, but if your Echo enters into that field, the resulting mini paradox stuns his enemies while the Z-Drive converts that improbability into a shield for Echo. And finally, like we saw in the trailer, Chrono Break. Whenever this ability is ready to use, you'll start seeing an afterimage of Echo at a consistent 4-second delay. By popping his ultimate, Echo will rewind himself back to that 4-second point, after which he'll let off a seriously powerful explosion. It also heals him, though like we saw in the trailer, he's still probably feeling that pain. Echo has huge potential for damage, but mastering him requires a deep understanding of all your repositioning tools. Once you get it down, you can play some serious mind games with your opponent, jumping in, out, and back into danger for those big kills. But Echo's also pretty squishy, so if you don't know what you're doing, that next big leap might just be your last. Riot knew what they had right away too, because Echo has become one of their furthest reaching characters outside of the main game. Most recently, there's 2XKO, an early access fighting game with some of Riot's favorite champions, and you better believe Echo's there with all of his league tricks translated right in. I especially like this big home run swing he does. You can purposefully whiff one of these from a safe distance, then when you have a combo going, knock your opponent in and chrono break back for a surprise big hit. And my favorite detail is that if you get interrupted during his level 3 super, you'll get a unique animation where Echo gets knocked down, but then uses the Z drive from the ground to make the move go off anyway. As a fighting game fan, this breaks so many rules and I love it. I also love him fumbling his baton on his victory pose and hitting the redo to get it right. It's like how I edit all of my line flubs out of these videos. You know I'm not saying... It's like how I edit all of my line flubs out of these videos. You know I'm not saying all this shit correctly the first time, right? And if you didn't know about 2XKO, then you definitely didn't know that Echo has his own spin-off game. And it's a Metroidvania. Convergence is this 10-hour adventure where you walk a mile in Echo's shoes through Piltover and Zaun, tangle with some other League champions like Warwick or Camille, tinker with some of his gadgets, build out a skill tree, and rewind like it's Sands of Time. Echo even gets to converse with a dystopian future Echo and prove himself the all-around better Echo. And then there's Arcane. Funny thing, Convergence has a scene where Echo looks into different parallel realities, including the one that Arcane takes place in, but because Arcane was so popular, Riot pivoted and made Arcane the main continuity that League takes place in. So by referencing it, Convergence effectively decanonized itself. Though I think both universes are pretty true to the kind of genius Echo is capable of. In Arcane, we get to see him build the Z drive with Heimerdinger to escape another reality he fell into, and we confirm that Echo can go back more than 4 seconds if he really wants to. It's just a really bad idea. Things start to shatter when you do that. Add in a could have been romance with Jinx, League's other favorite character, and you've cemented Echo as one of the top most important League champions easily. Time travel is such an OP power that it can easily destroy the stakes of your story, but with a balance of acuity and vulnerability, Echo walks that fine line between cool and compelling. Echo is our top mortal on this list, but now we enter the realm of the immortal. Ironically, with Mortal Kombat. Well, I think Aeon is technically immortal as a timekeeper, and Sassalamel can die, but he'll keep reincarnating, and Sargon was called an immortal, but I can assure you that he is quite mortal.
Get on with it.
Yes, get on with it!
Right, my bad. Mortal Kombat features many gods such as Raiden, the god of thunder, and Fujin, the god of wind, as well as many mortals who can go toe-to-toe with them. Eventually they had to band together to fight Shinnok, a much stronger elder god, but in MK11 we're introduced to a new level of cosmic threat, Kronika, who is a titan. Similar to the ancient Greek cosmology, titans are the predecessors to gods, Kronika herself being the mother of 2 major elder gods, and more to the point, the keeper of time. Not only does she maintain the Sands of Time, she basically wrote the script on how destiny is meant to play out. Her kids, Cetrion and Shinnok, were meant to maintain balance for eternity as the embodiments of good and evil. Which, by the way, Cetrion, where the hell have you been this whole time? Because we've been fighting off Shinnok and his followers ourselves since Mortal Kombat 4. Raiden took matters into his own hands and beheaded the Dark Elder God, and Kronika took that personally. Not because she cares about her kids, no, but because Raiden was overstepping his role in her grand plan, so now she's on the warpath to reset the timeline. Again.
Can I ask you to word that differently? You made it sound really stupid.
It is stupid.
Longtime Mortal Kombat fans already know that this is the second timeline in canon, Raiden himself resetting it last time. But this time would be bad. Or rather, it would be neutral, as Kronika believes neither good nor evil should ever triumph over the other. Fortunately for our heroes, resetting the timeline isn't something that Kronika can do effortlessly. It takes time, both literally and metaphorically. She has to essentially reshape the Sands of Time from scratch, and to do that she needs to channel some external form of power, usually a grand life force. Basically, all souls contain the essence of time within them, as in the amount of time that life has to live if left untampered with. So at different points, we see Chronica siphoning power from the Jinsei, the actual life force of Earthrealm, and Shang Tsung's crown, in which the sorcerer stockpiled countless stolen souls. Very Matrix of her, using entire populations as her personal battery. Now I'm starting to wonder if Quan Chi got that idea from Chronica. Even without the extra juice, Chronica can do a lot to tip the scales of a fight before it even starts. She doesn't seem to be able to go back in time and change things up per se, but in the present moment, we'll see her appear pretty much anywhere she wants to. She can stop time for anyone she doesn't feel like dealing with while keeping it moving for her allies or whoever she wants to monologue to, and resurrect people who died in the past, often as revenants who will obey her every command. And to those who haven't died yet, such as Jax or Shao Kahn, she can be extremely manipulative. Her nearly comprehensive knowledge of what's supposed to happen gives her extra insight into everyone's motivations, so she knows exactly what buttons to press. She also created the artificial being Geras, who is a great Chronomancer in his own right. In fact, Geras is playable in 2 games now, so it was a tough call between him and his build mother, but we simply haven't seen an entity of Chronica's power in the series before or since. And the coolest thing, everything she does appears with the unique power signature of the Sands of Time, which she can manipulate into clouds and sandstorms, sharpen into glass, or turn into herself to avoid attacks. It's honestly just a really cool detail, seeing Chronica's chronomancy overlapping into geomancy to give her a unique feel among the other Time Lords and Ladies. But like I said in the intro, if we're gonna accept any time gods, we need to see them using their powers in an actual fight. And luckily, Chronica does get her chance as a non-playable boss character. And like most fighting game bosses, she takes the usual fair mechanics of a mano-a-mano fight and throws it out the window. The only reason this fight happens in the first place is because Liu Kang manages to fuse with Raiden to become a fire-thunder combo god with enough celestial significance to not be susceptible to Chronica's no-contest abilities. So backed into a corner, Chronica can unleash a slew of crazy attacks, including the sand bending of time, teleportation via space-time slipping, lasers of centennial force, telekinesis, which could arguably be more space-time manipulation, and the ability to freeze, play, and rewind her projectiles to make dodging them a serious pain in the ass. She's also immortal enough to be immune to your fatal strikes, she can dissolve into sand if she doesn't feel like being in your combo, and her fatality is downright disrespectful. She snaps you in two like she's breaking a churro, reverses time, cuts you again down the middle hot dog style, reverses time, blasts your skin off like she's peeling a potato, then loops the process so you can just live in this cycle of agony forever. Damn it, now I'm hungry. Liu Kang eventually kills her in, I have to admit, a pretty badass way. I mean, if you want to be Sand Girl, you can be Sand. See what happens when sand meets fire. The crazy thing is that it's too late to save the timeline as it was. Chronica has already erased it back to year 0. All that's left to do is to put Liu Kang in charge of writing the new timeline and infuriate the fans. Again!
Yeah, cause I really want it.
You're going to undo everything you've written for a second time!
You're really entitled, you know that?
You put me on the box! Sorry, I got a little bit of a misconception here! What the fuck?
So as it stands now, Chronica hasn't come back yet in Liu Kang's new timeline. For a second we thought she did, but it was just Shang Tsung being tricky. Liu Kang makes a new world with all the same faces he remembers, leaves the hourglass in the care of Geras, and trusts the future to those who actually have to live in it. But really, that just proves what a powerful and tyrannical timekeeper Chronica was. By her decree, being the master of time didn't just mean making sure it flows, it meant deciding what happens. She was basically writing the story and all the characters from the start. If you want to make God laugh, you tell him your plans. But as a Titan, Chronica rarely has to worry about such things. Deja vu is the intense sensation that a new experience or situation has been lived through before, a sort of chronomancy within your own mind. And that's what's happening in my mind right now, because didn't I just talk about a Titan with sovereignty over time? Then again, Chronica is a fairly new character in the grand scheme of human history. Kronos is the OG. Serving as the main antagonist and final boss of Hades 2, Kronos is a Titan, child of the earth and sky, and the very embodiment of time as per Greek mythology. and he's a right old bastard. Fun fact, if you're familiar with other depictions of this mythological figure, you might not think of Kronos as a Time Lord. Take for instance Kronos from God of War, just a massive guy who can eat you. Also maybe this rock titan from Disney's Hercules is supposed to be Kronos, or this terrifying painting by Goya called Saturn Devouring His Son. Across media, he's more famous for his size and penchant for... cannibalistic filicide than any sort of time powers. While the best known stories of Zeus's war against Kronos date back past 700 BC by writers like Homer and Hesiod, his association with time seems to come in much later, like the age of Plato around 400 BC. That's still a long time for us, mind you, but from what I gather, the association between Kronos and time was something of a coincidence based on the name Kronos being like the word for time, chrono. I mean, his name usually isn't spelled with a CH. It's usually Kronos, Kronos, or Kronos.
I think I'll call him Bob.
But Plato asserts that maybe the name isn't a coincidence. Kronos was likely first a harvest deity, seen holding a scythe which he first used to castrate his father Uranus. Yeah, Greek mythology is crazy. Plato connects that as the god of the harvest, he's responsible for the passage of the seasons and thus the passage of time. This also makes him a likely inspiration for both Father Time and the Grim Reaper, giving him claim to the concepts of both time and death. And more narratively, he's kind of where the important part of the mythology starts, when we begin to keep track of a narrative timeline. And this lines up with his depiction in Hades 2. His betrayal of his father and subsequent fear of his own children is what started it all. He is the father of Hades, Poseidon, and Zeus, the foster father, in this version anyway, of Hera, Demeter, and Hestia, the grandfather of Hermes, Ares, Athena, Artemis, Apollo, Hephaestus, Dionysus, Heracles, Theseus, Zagreus, and Melinoe. He's where the story began, and with his return, he's where the story has all led up to. By the start of Hades 2, Kronos has already made his return with a devastating opening move. He took over the underworld, trapping everyone there, including the first game's protagonist, in time bubbles and subjugating Hades. He's now using the underworld's resources to wage a war against Mount Olympus. What's apparent is how one-sided this initial fight was. There was nothing anyone could do, it was just a matter of time. As a baby, Melinoe was spirited away when Kronos attacked, and has lived her whole life training in combat and witchcraft for the day she can confront Kronos. We soon learn that Kronos has also captured the Fates, meaning like Chronica, he not only controls the flow of time, but the narrative of events. It should be noted, Mel's sorcery is able to circumvent the will of the Fates, and seems to be the only reason that she can stand up to him at all without just being written to fail. But Kronos can do just about everything else to stop her. Our first meeting with Kronos, he appears as an apparition outside of Erebus, trying to ascertain who Mel is and where her resistance camp is. The first time Mel proves to be the slightest threat, Kronos casually drops her through a portal into Asphodel sometime in the past, subjecting her to attacks by endless demons until her counterspell lets her escape. He continues to watch from afar, taunting her and trying to break her spirit. When Mel finally gets to the House of Hades, the place is refurbished with gears and gizmos, patrolled by Kronos' hourglasses that can freeze Mel and leave her open to attack. And when Mel finally gets to the throne room, he brandishes his old scythe and gets to work, creating more time bubbles, ripping apart time and space and leaving rifts of unreality to explode in his wake, and notably, any boons or arcana that you've collected to slow down time, like Hermes' close call or Selene's phase shift, don't work on him. And if you want to pause the game during his fight, you'll need to prepare a special incantation, otherwise he'll just chastise you before resuming his attack.
No, you do not control the flow of time. Not here.
He can also port in minions from the past and present, and place time banners that buff his team with action nullifying shields to protect them. And if you make it to phase 2, well, like I said before, once you master time, you have the power to transport any battle into some big clock space. Here, he starts bursting out instant kill moves, and summons hourglass minions that can heal him by reversing the damage done to him. He gets much more liberal with his stasis bubbles and time rift attacks, plus sweeping clock hands empowered with cosmic energy. And if you can believe it, there's versions of this fight with a phase 3, We've outgrown the clock battlefield now and are sent to the end of time, when the universe is returned to primordial chaos, where all matter left in existence can be accelerated to the speed of light from Kronos' hand straight through your head. And Kronos can call on any number of his past duplicates to switch in and attack, forcing Malinoway to avoid them and find the one with the health bar that actually matters. And even when you do kill him, his body naturally starts to piece itself back together. All victories against Kronos are fleeting. There is no permanent end to time, because now we've been to the end of time, and he's there too. Stopping him for good requires an incantation powered by pure entropy and forged with some of his own magic to erase him permanently. Because as it turns out, the only being that can truly stop Kronos is Kronos. At least, that was the plan. Together with Zagreus, Malinoway finds a more diplomatic way to end this feud, but if you ever miss the old days of megalomaniacal Kronos, don't worry. Grandpa's happy to take you to an alternate timeline where he's still evil, and enact a never-ending journey to cut out every possibility of his victory from the multiverse like weeds in a garden. So yeah, if you want to beat Kronos, you need Kronos. Like with the rest of its characters, Hades 2 took Kronos with all of his mythological depictions, and found a way to write these contradicting accounts into a cohesive story about an all-powerful being. He's withered with age, yet so horribly intimidating that he can make immortals fear mortality. He can supersede death and bend it in his favor, creating a never-ending undead army on the surface, and even resurrecting history's greatest beast, who in an unrivaled Oath version of the fight will even battle alongside him. He is the true titan of time and the greatest chronomancer in video games. He is time itself. Technically beatable, but never ending. I'm the Green Scorpion, and if there's anything I took away from this video, is that time is such an important and terrifying concept. Messing with it can make or break a story. And these 10 characters are the ones who break their story to make it better. Leave your favorite Chronomancers down in the comments, and I hope you had a great time. Can we go back and do a timeline where I don't make that pun?